Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast. I'm your host for today's episode, Patrick Kenny, and we have, I think we got a good episode lined up for us. First, we're going to be talking about the Jake Odorizzi signing to the Astros. We're going to see how that's going to potentially shake up their lineup. Just to see if they might still go and get somebody else starting pitching, like I talked about just a couple episodes ago. And then I also got the top rookies in baseball this upcoming year, and then I have my prediction for Rookie of the Year. After that, we got an AL Central preview, and then we're going to wrap up today's episode with the top 20 best teams of all time. All that coming up in just a second. All right, everybody. So, Jake Odorizzi signed a 2-year, $20.25 million deal with the Astros just a few days ago, and he has the opportunity to make about $24 or up to $30 million. All the way up to 30 includes all of his incentives, and the $24 million is a doable. Very doable incentive, because that one in particular has he only has to pitch in 30 games. If he makes his 30 appearances, he gets that extra $4 million-ish bonus. And so we're going to look at some of his stats. Last year he was a bit hurt, but so his stats aren't great for that last year, but over the course of his career, he's been a solid pitcher. He's never been the guy that you're going to throw out on the mound as your number one unless you absolutely have to. So he broke into the league in 2012 and pitched a few games with Kansas City. In that year, he only pitched 7 1/3 innings with only 2 games started and an 0-1 record. Not a good sample size. The following year, he was then traded to Tampa Bay, and in that year, he only pitched in 7 games, started 4, had 29.2 innings pitched, or 29 2/3 innings pitched, and then after that season, he had a decent year with the Rays, going 11-13 with a 4.13 ERA in his first full season actually at the big league level. And he pitched in 31 games, started all 31, 168 innings, striking out 174, holding opponents to a 242 average, and a decent whip with a 1.28. 2015, he didn't pitch as much. He only pitched in 28 games, but started all of them. Had a much lower ERA than the 4.13 the year prior. He had a 3.35 ERA with the Rays in 2015. Pitched 169 innings, going 9-9 with 150 strikeouts, so not as many strikeouts, but it was a different year. He was getting a lot more ground balls that season than strikeouts in comparison. And in 2016, he went 10-6 with a 3.69 ERA, pitching in a career high 33 games, starting all 33, going a 187 2/3 innings pitched that season with 166 strikeouts. A very solid year, very, very solid year for him. And just as like a little disclaimer, I only do the career stats and stuff for players like these just so in case you aren't familiar with him, you can get a better understanding of who he is as a pitcher or just a player in general with other signings and things like that. And so in 2017, his last year in Tampa Bay, he went 10-8 with a 4.14 ERA, pitching in 28 games, only 143 innings pitched, and 127 strikeouts. He was a little hurt that season, missed a few starts here and there, but nothing as bad as last season where he was just unable to really play. And in 2018, he started his 3-year stint with the Minnesota Twins, and in that season, he did make an All-Star, or in that time frame with the Twins, I should say, he did make an All-Star team in 2019. But in 2018, he went 7-10 with a 4.49 ERA. Got roughed up in that. At that time, it was a very tough division with the Cleveland Indians just being a powerhouse from about 2016 until really last year, where they got taken over by the Twins finally. And in 2018, he also pitched in 164 innings and had 162 strikeouts, which was significant improvement from his 127 strikeouts with the Rays just that year before. In 2019, his All-Star season, he went 15-7 with a 3.51 ERA, pitching in 30 games, had 159 innings pitched, only gave up 16 home runs that year, which was the lowest he had given up since his very first year, or his very first full season, I should say, with the Rays back in 2014, when he gave up just 20, and then the year after that, he actually gave up, in 2015, he gave up 18 home runs, but that was still significant improvement from his year before in Tampa Bay, his last year in Tampa Bay, where he gave up 30 home runs. He struck out in 2018, 162 batters, like I said, and then in 2019, his best year as a pro, he had a 3.51 ERA, which wasn't his lowest. His lowest was in 2015, but that was still significant improvement from the two previous years where he was above 4, and in 2018 where he was almost at 4.50 for an ERA. In 2019, he also pitched in 159 innings, giving up just the 16 home runs, which is a career low in a full season. He obviously didn't give up that many home runs in 2020 or the 2 years that he was sort of just a prospect that was getting work in the bigs. Also in 2019, he held opponents to a 2.34 ERA and posted a 121 whip, which is a very, very respectable whip, especially considering the team that he's pitching on now, where he doesn't have to be the number one guy. And last year he was struggling with some injuries. 0-1 record, a 6.59 ERA, only pitched in 4 games, tallying 13 2/3 innings, giving up 16 hits, 10 earned runs, and 4 home runs, which is uncharacteristic. Only struck out 12, and opponents hit 291 off of him. So he's going to definitely be looking to get back into that sort of groove, I would say, back to where he was. He was a one-time All-Star, like I've said a couple times, in 2019 with the Twins, and he had a great year that year, obviously. But now with the Astros, RotoChamp and others are projecting Odorizzi to be the number 3 starter for the Astros this year. which is going to be pretty good because they have Zach Greinke, and everybody knows Zach Greinke can still be that ace that they have. They're not going to have Verlander for this year. They might get him back next year, but I think if you're an Astros fans, I wouldn't count on it. He is way up there in age, and honestly, just doesn't. It's just going to be very impressive if Verlander is going to be able to come back from Tommy John at such an old age. He is 37, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. But for the most part, this is probably going to be Jake Odorizzi's easiest division for sure. I mean, with the guys that he's going to be playing, like the Angels and the Athletics aren't slouches, that is for sure. But when your entire career up until this point has been the AL East and the AL Central, going to the AL West has got to be a very happy position for him, just because he doesn't have to face such difficult opponents all the time. And I mean, now he has to face Mike Trout all the time and guys like Shohei Ohtani and Matt Chapman from the Athletics, but for the most part, he is on the best team in the AL West. I mean, they still have Altuve, Bregman, Brantley, Correa, Alvarez, Gurriel, and the list kind of goes on from there. They did lose Springer, and that's going to hurt them, but for the most part, the Astros are in a very good place. I really do like their rotation. I do think, however, that with only Zach Greinke and Lance McCullers as your solid 1-2, if Jake Odorizzi is able to get back to where he was in 2019 and back into his 2019 form where he was an all-star, he could probably be that number 2 guy, and then the Astros might not have to trade for another starting pitcher, but I think that they're going to need that 4th starting pitcher just in general, just because their number 4 and 5 guys aren't all that great. They have Christian Javier as their number 5, and he's a rookie. And last year he's not a rookie, I should say. Last year he was a rookie, and this year will be his probably sophomore year, depending on how the owners and the front offices determine his arbitration and years pro status type deal. But in last year, Christian Javier pitched in 12 games, had 54 innings pitched with a 5-2 record, a 3.48 ERA, a .99 WHIP, and 54 strikeouts. So if he is going to be able to get back into that really good rotation, I think that he will be just as effective as he could potentially be. He is clearly one of the Astros' top prospects, or was one of the top prospects before he got into the league this year. But they also have another starter who's relatively young, going into his age 26 season, and probably his second full year in the bigs. He did pitch in 5 games last year, but Jose Urquidy is a decent pitcher so far in his brief appearances. He's only pitched in 14 games in his career in 2019. He threw 41 innings in the 9 games that he played for a 2-1 record, a 3.95 ERA, 40 strikeouts, 7 walks. And then in 2020, he only pitched in 5 games, had 29 innings pitched with a 1-1 ERA, or 1-1 record, and a 2.73 ERA. So the Astros are definitely going to be a very good team. I think that they are one dominant pitcher away, and that might be going and getting John Paxton at the trade deadline, or whoever's available at the trade deadline. John Paxton might not be available depending on how the Mariners end up playing this year. It's going to be a very, very interesting, very, very interesting season for sure for the Astros, and for the rest of baseball for that matter. I mean, the Angels might come out and win the division. They might make a wild card. The Athletics are also in the running for the division. This division isn't necessarily a toss-up, while the Astros are favored, but the Angels have a good team, and a lot of people are picking the Athletics to be that dark horse team that just kind of surprises everybody and blows everyone out of the water. I mean, they have a decent lineup with Elvis Andrus and Steven Piscotty out in the outfield, Sean Murphy behind the plate. Murphy is probably going to get a lot of he's definitely going to get a lot of different or a lot of, I should say, a lot of rest with Armias Garcia as the backup catcher, and they also have Matt Olson at first, Matt Chapman at third, and then their pitching lineup is pretty good as well. Like, they have Sean Manaea, Mike Fiers, Chris Bissett, Jose Lorazzo. They definitely have the talent. Sean Manaea is probably, in my opinion, their best pitcher. But he did have a rough season last year with a 4.50 ERA in the 11 outings that he was able to get. It's definitely going to be a super, super interesting division, to say the very least, just because of where they are where the division is. This division isn't necessarily going to be as close as maybe the AL Central, the NL Central, or even the NL West. Necessarily, but it is going to come down to September to say the very least. This division is not going to be won on the first pitch in April or May. It's going to be a dogfight for sure. There's definitely a good amount of, I wouldn't say fear, but a good amount of talk or maybe around the Astros maybe not winning the division. Now they've been dominating this division for the last few years. But the AL West, in comparison to most divisions, is probably the weakest overall, just because of how top heavy they are. It's pretty much the Astros in the S tier, and then in the A tier it's the Angels and maybe the Athletics, and then it just kind of falls off after that with the Rangers and the Mariners. Neither of those teams are likely going to be any kind of good this season. It's just that those teams in particular are just so far away from the rest of their division, let alone the rest of the league. Like, I don't even think that the Astros I could definitely see the Rays potentially knocking out the Astros in the first round. Or even if the Astros don't, I could even see the Astros not making the playoffs. I could see them winning 90 games and not making the playoffs this year. It's going to be an interesting year for sure, but I don't know if the Astros are not talented enough, but I don't know if they're going to be able to stay healthy enough to compete with the Yankees or the Rays from the AL East, or even the Angels or the Athletics in their own division. I think that it's going to be super interesting to see if one of those teams, or if one of those three teams, are going to, obviously one will make the playoffs because if they win the division, they make the playoffs. But I don't know if they're going to make it past the divisional round and get a chance to play the Yankees or the winner of the winner of the Yankees and Rays series potentially, because that's likely what's going to happen. Is the Yankees are going to win the division and the Rays are likely to get one of the two wild card spots, and then I think that both of those teams are probably the two best teams in the AL right now. But we're going to take a short break, and in just a few minutes, we're going to go over the top rookies of this year, and then I'll give you my prediction for the rookie of the year.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And welcome back in, everybody. So right here, I'm going to give you guys some of my top prospects for this year just to look at, just to see who we're going to get a lot of interesting action out of everybody, out of all of these new guys. So I'm going to give you all about 25 guys to look at and how they might do this upcoming year. And the first guy that I've got is a man by the name of Logan Gilbert. Logan Gilbert is the guy, and he is a right-handed pitcher from Seattle. He had a good 2019 year in low A and high A. He is a very young prospect. He's only pitched in low A and high A, but he had a 2.13 ERA in 2019, had 165 strikeouts to 33 walks in the 135 innings that he was able to pitch. Oh, and I'm sorry, he also pitched in double A. All of those stats are combined from low A through double A, and has impressed the team so far this year. Also did very well in reports in the alternate training site last year. If you guys remember, last season the Major League Baseball allowed teams to have an alternative training site where they were able to keep their top prospects in that side little area, sort of off in the corner, kind of I'll play with you if I need to kind of deal. But so far he is reported to have a very good and polished command of four pitches, a mid-90s fastball, a good slider, a curveball, and a changeup. And reportedly made strides with command and stuff over this off-season. And the number 2 starter is probably, or he's going to be the number 2 starter in the minors, but is probably going to get called up around mid-season or so. Number 24 is a catcher by the name of Joey Bart from San Francisco. And he didn't do well in his big league debut in 2020. He had 103 at-bats, and he's probably going to get more minor league development in this upcoming season, just because, I mean, they still have, in San Francisco, they still have Buster Posey, and they could probably use Buster Posey elsewhere just to get other guys some more reps and things like that. I don't know if y'all are old enough to remember. I know I barely am, but back in the day when Joe Maurer was the man in baseball, he was the catcher for the Minnesota Twins for a long time, and then they had to move him to first base and DH when they started getting a bunch of, or when they started to realize that they needed to give their prospects some time. And so in 2020, he had a 2.33 average with no home runs. So he's going to get some more time. He was an above-average defender last year, and has shown, reportedly has shown great work ethic. He was a little off balance at the plate, which basically resulted in weak contact and a lot of chased breaking balls, like sliders outside the zone kind of deal. So it's likely that he was just way too nervous and probably pressing that year. So there's definitely room for improvement, but I think if he goes back down to the minors this season and then comes back up with a decent year, I think that he will be able to. I think that he will be able to hit about 250 if he gets back up and back up to speed. And once he starts to get comfortable, I think his average might improve. He'll probably for sure hit a few home runs as well. At number 23, I have Tristan McKenzie from Cleveland. He is a really good pitcher for the Cleveland Indians. The one thing that the Cleveland Indians are able to do very, very well and they've done it for the last 20 or 30 years, is just develop pitching talent. They had Cliff Lee and CC Sabathia 20 years ago. Years before, they had Bartolo Colon, and the list goes on. And then you look at this last decade, they had Corey Kluber, Trevor Bauer. After they traded for him, they've had Shane Bieber, Mike Clevenger. They have Aaron Savali. The list goes on for Cleveland pitchers. It's kind of ridiculous. But the reason that McKenzie hasn't been in the bigs yet very much is just because he's had a tough time staying healthy because of how tall and slim he is. He is just super, super slim frame, but has really good stuff. And in 2020, he got his debut and posted a 3.24 ERA and 42 strikeouts and held opponents to a sub-180 batting average, and in the 33 innings that he pitched in. So the ERA is just, he probably left a few pitches up in the zone, and because of that, gave up a few too many home runs. But if he can stay healthy, he definitely has the stuff to be Cleveland's number 2 guy behind Shane Bieber. Obviously, Shane Bieber is the man there in Cleveland, and we're going to start going through these a little bit faster. At number 22, I have Andrew Vaughn of the Chicago White Sox. He's a first baseman. In 2019, he had 205 ABs through rookie ball all the way up to high A ball. Had 6 home runs and hit 278. So apparently with the White Sox, he did a very good job at staying healthy and did a very good job keeping his discipline at the plate good in that alternative training site. So be on the lookout for Andrew Vaughn for Chicago. At number 21, I have Casey Miz, a right-handed pitcher from Detroit, and he was very good in 2019 between high A ball and double A ball. He threw a 2.55 ERA, 106 strikeouts as opposed to 23 walks, and only gave up 80 hits in the 109 innings that he threw. Miz has 3 really good pitches. He has a splitter, a mid to upper 90s fastball, and a pretty good slider as well. It's every once in a while his stuff is a little flat, but that doesn't mean that he isn't going to be a very good, very, very good pitcher if he can get up to the bigs. At number 20, I have Shane Baz Shane Baz is a very, very good pitcher. And I actually have a fairly funny story about Shane Baz. Actually, it's kind of funny. He's a really good pitcher, and in high school, my freshman year, he was, I believe, a senior, and the high school I went to at the time had hosted a tournament, and his team came down and played my school's varsity team, and he threw a no-hitter, and ended up losing the game 1-0 off of my high school's. They got an error. They scored on an error, I should say, and their offense couldn't get going that day. So my high school ended up actually winning a game against Shane Baz, which is kind of a cool little thing to go. But he probably isn't going to get any playing time this year. He might get a few innings here or there. He's definitely got a high-powered fastball and pretty good off-speed stuff as well. The only thing that he really needs to work on is just a little bit more control. But the Rays have a ton of really good prospects as well, so they're probably going to be good for quite a while. At number 18, I have Luis Campusano. He's a catcher for San Diego, and he did a very good job in 2020 when he got brought up. And in 2021, the Padres got Austin Nola, which means Campusano is probably going to be in the minors, but will likely get called back up after the All-Star break. And he moves up as well with the departure of Francisco Mejia, I should say, actually, to the Rays in the Blake Snell trade. So be on the lookout for him after the All-Star break. At number 17, a right-handed pitcher named Spencer Howard from Philly. In 2019, he had a 2.03 ERA with 94 strikeouts, 16 walks, 43 hits, and 71 innings pitched over a few different levels. He has a really good fastball, a decent changeup, and he's developing a third pitch at breaking ball. He did get some time in the bigs, but he couldn't command the zone very well. So he just kind of got clobbered, but he definitely has the potential to be a good number 2 guy for the Phillies this year if he can settle down on the bump. At number 16, another Tampa Bay Rays pitcher, Luis Patina. In 2019, at 19 years old, he had a 2.57 ERA, 123 strikeouts and 38 walks, only 69 hits in 94 innings pitched in High A. He didn't do great as a reliever before being traded to the Rays in the offseason, but in 2020, he just didn't have the command that he had in 2019, and so it's going to be interesting to see if he is going to be able to sort of get that control back and just kind of relax back out there on the mound and stop pressing, because that's kind of what it looks like he's doing. At number 15, we have Yazen Dominguez, an outfielder for the Yankees. He's only 18 and hasn't played any pro baseball yet, but the potential that he has is Mickey Mantle-esque. He's a switch-hitting center fielder with power and speed, and he definitely has the tools to be a 30-30 guy. Just looking at who he is as a person, he looks to be a Mickey Mantle-esque type person. But it's still going to be probably 2 or 3 years before he's in the bigs, just because of how young he is, and he hasn't gotten a chance to play baseball here in the bigs, or in Major League Baseball yet. At number 13, I have Nate Pearson, a righty out of Toronto. In 2019, he threw he had a 2.30 ERA, 129 strikeouts, 27 walks, and 102 innings pitched. Or 101 and 2/3 innings pitched, excuse me, and that was everywhere from high A ball, double A ball, and triple A ball. In 2020, he was shut down because of elbow soreness, and also kind of lost his command, and that's probably attributed to his elbow soreness and things like that. At number 20, we have Spencer Torkelson, a corner infielder for Detroit, and he was drafted first overall in 2020. Spent the summer at the alternative training site, and he's a really good hitter with a lot of plate discipline and a lot of power, and definitely is going to be a middle of the order guy, so anywhere from 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 at the lowest, and has definitely the pop in his bat to be a 30 home run guy, but his defensive ability is questionable at best. The Tigers want him to play third and potentially be at first. He definitely has the bat, it looks like, to be a DH at the very least this season. I would definitely expect him to get some time this year, probably after the All-Star break, but the Detroit's probably not going to do a lot this year, so it's very likely that they're just going to try and get him out there as fast as possible just to get him those stats and see if the Tigers are going to be able to move forward with him. Now at number 11, I have Ian Anderson, and he was a decent guy. He's been a decent pitcher for the Braves. Had a 1.95 ERA and 41 strikeouts in the 32 innings that he pitched with the Braves last year. He is definitely a very good pitcher, and is likely going to be one of the top 3 guys in the Braves rotation this upcoming year. Now, at number 10, I have a White Sox second baseman, Nick Madrigal. He had a decent debut in the bigs, had a 340 average and 103 at-bats. He separated his shoulder and had to get off-season surgery. And so that's probably going to keep him out until May, maybe late April. But when he is in the lineup, he is a very good defensive player. Definitely a typical second baseman when you think about it. He's not going to hit anything for power, but he can still compete for the batting title and steal 20 bags a year easily, and playing second base. At number 9, I have Michael Kopech, a righty for the White Sox. He missed 2019 after getting Tommy John, and opted out of the 2020 season. But he has been a very good pitcher at every level as a pro. And in 2018, he did get 3 starts and then fell victim to his Tommy John surgery. And so it'll be interesting to see if he'll be able to bounce back and see if he can get back to his pre-injury form. But he definitely can be the White Sox number 1 guy if healthy. Maybe not this year. I don't know if Tony La Russa is going to trust him to be that number 1 guy if he is healthy, but nevertheless, he has that talent. He definitely has that talent. And so at number 6, I have C.J. Abrams, a shortstop for San Diego. He's not going to be able to play shortstop there. He'll probably have to move to the right side of the infield, probably second base, somewhere else. Or he'll probably be traded, but he is definitely a really good guy for San Diego, a really good prospect for them to have and trade if they need to. I have Mckenzie Gore, a left-handed pitcher for San Diego, as the number 7. He had, in 2019 in the minors, he had a 1.69 ERA, 135 strikeouts, and 101 innings between high A and double A. But showed some inconsistencies in his mechanics during the 2020 season in the alternative training site. But I expect this guy to get into the bigs and make a big difference. Number 6, I have Marco Luciano, a shortstop for San Francisco. He had a great pro debut in 2019, a 3.02 average, 10 home runs, 9 stolen bases between rookie ball and low A ball, and at 17 years old. And then in 2020 at 18, he was a very good player at the alternative training site. He is a little bit away from the bigs still, but I wouldn't be surprised if San Francisco brings him up probably after the All-Star break. Just to get him some at-bats. At number 5, I have Jared Kellenick, an outfielder for Seattle. Kellenick did a very good job in 2019 with a 291 ERA, batting average, a 364 on-base percentage, and a 540 slugging, with 23 home runs and 20 stolen bases, and spent the 2020 season at the alternative training site. He is just 21, but he reached AA in 2019. Definitely a guy to keep your eyes out for if you're in Seattle. Number 4, Sixto Sanchez, a righty out of Miami, did fantastic for them and was very vital for them making the playoffs in 2020. He is definitely a young guy, still needs to settle in the bigs, but he's definitely going to be that ace for Miami for a long time, I think. At number 3, Julio Rodriguez, an outfielder for Seattle. He's only 20. He already has crazy power, had 12 home runs and 326 batting average in low A and high A ball in 2019, and then did a very good job working in the Dominican Winter League and as well as at the alternative training site. Number 2, Adli Rushman, a catcher for Baltimore. He doesn't have very many official pro at-bats under his belt with a 254 average in his brief 2019 minor league debut, but he is a very good talent and could definitely be an all-star backstop when he gets to the bigs. The Orioles don't really have an incentive to push him rapidly, but we'll probably see him at some point. The Orioles just aren't going to be very good this year, so we'll probably see him get pulled up like in September or maybe at the earliest the All-Star break. And the number 1 prospect and rookie, probably the rookie of the year, I have Wander Franco. He didn't see any official game action in 2020. He did play a lot in the alternative training site. He's going to turn 21 in March and is going to make his big league season debut this season. He's a switch-hitting shortstop who hits for average and power, just crazy offensive talent, and a very good defensive player as well. This is definitely my number 1 guy that you guys all need to be looking out for. If you can pick him up on a fantasy team or draft him maybe in a later round, I would absolutely go for it. So don't go anywhere. I know this was a long segment, but in just a few seconds, we're going to be going over the AL Central, and then right after that, I have my 20 best teams of all time.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be, visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back in, everybody, to the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Patrick Kenny here, still with you. And right now we're going to be going over the AL Central and seeing how everything is probably going to shake out there. So the Twins definitely are the favorite, but this is a super tight division. This division is absolutely going down to probably the last division or last game of the year, and it's probably going to be a divisional game between the Indians and the Twins, or the White Sox and the Twins, or heck, even the Royals maybe. So and it's going to be one heck of a year. So the Twins are projected to win 89 games, and the White Sox and Indians are expected to win 85 games and 84 games, respectively. But anything can happen, especially in baseball. And depending on how the prospects end up performing, and seeing if maybe a Tristan McKenzie for the Tribe, if he can just be an absolute beast on the mound, and win a few extra games that maybe people aren't necessarily expecting them to win, it can definitely be something. It's definitely going to be a fun division to watch. Now, anything happening with any of these teams in the playoffs, probably not going to be very likely, but at the same time, this division is going to be very fun to watch, and to find out who is going to win this division and get that probably third playoff spot. So the Twins have a very good team. They have Max Kepler at leading off. They're going to have Luis Arraez at second, Josh Donaldson at third. Donaldson and Cruz are their 3 and 4 hitters. Donaldson probably not what he was with the Blue Jays, and probably not going to be what he was even a couple years ago with the Braves. But he's still a very solid piece. Nelson Cruz getting up there in age at his age 40 season. It's going to be interesting to see if he is going to still, if he's going to just fall off this year, or if he's going to be able to stay as good as he is, or as good as he has been his entire career up until this point. And playing DH is probably going to be very good for him, not having to be out in the field and that kind of thing, just because if being out in the field and hitting is definitely a toll on the body for sure. And I mean, playing a season where your season is 162 games at a minimum, it is definitely a very long season. So Nelson Cruz probably going to be a very good player for them. And then they also have Miguel Sano at first, and they have Alex Kirilloff in the outfield, and then Byron Buxton as well in the outfield. Ryan Jeffers behind the dish, and their weak spot, I would say, offensively, is probably their catcher, but that's okay, because you would prefer a catcher to be a solid defensive catcher, and then what you get from him offensively is just a plus in baseball, instead of a instead of a catcher that is just an absolute monster at the dish, and instead is just awful behind the plate. The catchers are definitely valued much more defensively than they are offensively. And then they added Aldernan Simmons at short. And speaking of defensive players that are just amazing, Aldernan Simmons is probably the best defensive shortstop in the game right now. Arguably one of the best shortstops, if not the best shortstop in the game right now. Now, I don't personally think that, but I feel like you could definitely make the argument for that. And their rotation is pretty good as well. They have Jose Barrios as their number 1. They have Kenta Maeda at their number 2, Michael Pineda, the former Yankee, as their number 3, and J.A. Happ as the number 4 guy, and then Matt Shoemaker as their number 5 guy. So 2 through 5, I should say, they're vets. They definitely are guys that can win some games for you, win some tough games for you, especially a Michael Pineda, who has had a decent career in the bigs. Never really was that just dominant ace that the Yankees were looking for, but has still always been a very solid pitcher, very reliable pitcher. Kenta Maeda the same way. It's definitely going to be very, very interesting to see how well they're going to pitch and things like that. I really like this rotation. I don't think it's even close to being the best in baseball, but it's definitely a very solid rotation. On any one day, they can have a guy go out there and throw for 7 or 8 innings and just absolutely shove. And that's really all you can ask for from your starters, is just to get you to that bullpen and get you to your closer and give you the opportunity to win. That's all you can ask for from your starters. And while they don't have a great bullpen, and I know I've been talking about this a lot, but I think Trevor May is one of the best pitchers in baseball, at least coming out of the bullpen. And the loss of him, I think, is going to set them back more than I think they're anticipating. But they do still have really good pitchers out of the bullpen. They have Randy Dobnak, who's probably going to be a long reliever for them. Might get some starts if they go with a 6-man rotation. But I think that he's probably going to be the guy that they go to for for longer stints, like if one of their starters just gets roughed up and has to get pulled after 1 1/3 inning, they're going to probably go to Randy Dobnak to get them to that 5th or 6th. They also have Tyler Duffy, who is one hell of a pitcher as well. Alex Colm, who is probably going to be their best closer in my opinion. And they also have Taylor Rogers, who is in general just a very solid reliever. One team that you definitely can't forget about by any means is the Chicago White Sox. And the White Sox are going to be dangerous this year. They have Tim Anderson, Adam Eaton, Yasmani Grandal, Jose Abreu, Elroy Jimenez, and Johan Moncada. And then and they also have a couple other guys that are not necessarily name guys, but decent enough pitchers. And their starters are pretty decent as well. For example, their number 5 guy this year is probably going to be Carlos Rondon, who was a very good pitcher and was once I thought was going to be their ace. They have an aging Lance Lynn, a Dylan Cease, who I don't know much about, but he is still a young guy, and last year pitched in 12 games, had 58 innings pitched, a 4 ERA. The year before, in 2019, he pitched in 14 games, had 73 innings. a 4-7 win-loss record, and a 5.79 ERA. But he's definitely not going to be their ace by any stretch of the imagination, but they definitely have a decent chance to win a few games with that man right there. And then their projected ace is Lucas Giolito. In 2020, he was 4-3 in the 12 games that he pitched, had 72 innings pitched, a 3.48 ERA, a 104 WHIP, 97 Ks, which is really good. The year before, in 2019, he was even better than in 2020. He had a 3.41 ERA, 176 innings pitched, a 14-9 record, and 228 strikeouts. And his fastball was averaging about 94 that season, which is actually pretty decent. And I know that we all get caught up in the stats of or when we see everybody coming out of the bullpen throwing over 100, and we forget how good a solid fastball is by a starting pitcher, and he definitely has a very solid fastball, very good chance. And they also have Dallas Keuchel. Kykel, going into his age 33 season, won a Cy Young a few years ago. Kykel in last season pitched in 11 games, 6-2 record, a 1.99 ERA. He never has struck out a bunch of guys, except for maybe his 2015 season where he struck out over 200. But ever since then, he hasn't even broken 150 strikeouts, or he's only broken 150 strikeouts one time, and that was in 2018, where he had 153 strikeouts. But Dallas Keuchel is definitely a ground ball guy. He's going to let the defense work and let the defense do what they're out there to do. And honestly, that's my favorite kind of pitcher to watch. Just a guy that's not going to strike everybody out, a guy that's going to let stuff happen and let his defense do the work for him. And this defense is just star-studded. You have Tim Anderson at shortstop and Yohan Moncada at third. That left side, I would say, is one of the best, probably, in my opinion, the number 2 best left side of the infield. Now, I would have said last year that would have been maybe the third or fourth, but with the Cleveland Indians trading Francisco Lindor over to the New York Mets, that definitely weakens that left side of the infield for the Tribe. And I mean, the White Sox are going to be a good team this year. There's no doubt about it, and they're definitely trying to build something special and to compete. They still have Jose Abreu, and Yasmani Grandal is still out there kicking, even though feels like been in the league for forever, but he's really only entering his age 32 season. If he can be that catcher for them, that solid everyday catcher, and then still get some DH appearances every now and again, I think that's going to be really huge for the White Sox. And their bullpen is okay. It's nothing super special. They have Liam Hendricks, I should say, as their closer. He's probably going to get about 30 saves this year. He's not going to have an ERA that's super high. It's going to be around 3, maybe a high 290 area. But other than that, there's nothing that is really going to stand out, except for maybe Ronaldo Lopez, who is one of their projected starters and relief pitchers as well. That Ronaldo Lopez is probably going to be the White Sox guy, long reliever guy, where they go to, like I said just a few minutes ago, where if their starter gets roughed up, they're going to go to this guy to get them out of that, and then just try and get them through till they can safely use their bullpen. And up next, I think is one of the more interesting teams to look at, and that's the Cleveland Indians. Now, the Indians for the last few years were dominating this division, and I mean, obviously, it's hard to dominate the division year after year after year after year. But the Indians did it for a few years there, and they kind of traded away all of their all of their better pitchers, essentially because their owners just kind of didn't want to. The owners just didn't kind of want to pay the players, so they traded, and they're going to try and keep their payroll as low as they can, which is why they traded Francisco Lindor and Carlos Carrasco. Now the Indians still have a very good starting pitching lineup. They still have Shane Bieber and Zach Plesac. Plesac is probably going to be their number 2 guy. I think he's probably going to get he's probably going to get about 10 to 12 wins, maybe if he's lucky 14. Shane Bieber, another 15-win guy, probably could get maybe 17 to 20 if he's really on this year. And then you also have Aaron Savali, who is a solid number 3 guy. He's going to get probably 10 wins this year, pitch about 150 innings, maybe more. His ERA isn't going to be great, but he's not going to walk a lot of guys, so that's for sure. He's not going to strike out very many guys either. He's similar to a Dallas Keuchel, where he's going to let his defense work. He's not going to do too much. And then they're going to have Tristan McKenzie out there as well. McKenzie is probably not going to get that many innings just because of how young he is, and today in today's baseball age, everybody is always worried about pitch limits and things like that. So McKenzie might get shut down at the end of the season, or toward the end of the season, if the Indians think that they don't have a real shot at making the playoffs. But if Tristan McKenzie is the valuable piece that is going to try or that could get them over the hump to win that division, I would not be surprised at all if the Tribe end up keeping McKenzie on for the entire year. But I also wouldn't be surprised if they go the other way as well and just kind of shut him down. Somewhere along the lines of like a Steven Strasburg type deal, just because the Indians do have those fears about his injuries or potential injuries and his frame. But the Indians have a very good lineup as well, with Cesar Hernandez, Jose Ramirez, Eddie Rosario, Franmil Reyes, Roberto Perez, who it was a surprisingly good hitting catcher the last couple years. They also have Jake Bowers and Oscar Mercado. The Indians aren't going anywhere. They're not what they were a few years ago, I'll give you that, but they're still not going anywhere, and they're still going. And while the division still technically goes through the Twins, you still have to go through the Indians to get to the Twins. So it's not going to be a cakewalk by any stretch of the imagination. And their bullpen is just as good as ever. They were able to bring back Oliver Perez. They also brought back Brian Shaw. Brian Shaw probably not going to get that much work out of the bullpen this year like he did in 2016, but he's still going to get some time, definitely. They have Phil Madden and Adam Plunko. And they also have Nick Wintergreen, who might be their closer. They definitely have a decent bullpen. I wouldn't necessarily be afraid of it, but at the same time, I would probably be aware of their bullpen. And we're going to real quick go through the Royals. The Royals probably aren't going to do anything super special, but they have the chance to change and shake up this division a lot. Like, if it's a division if it's coming down to the Twins and the White Sox, and the White Sox are playing the Royals, there's a good chance that the Royals sweep that series and and the Twins win the division because of it, or something of that nature. But they have Whit Merrifield, Andrew Benintendi, Carlos Santana, Jorge Soler, Salvador Perez is still there, Hunter Dozier, a really good utility guy, and with their starters, they still have pretty decent starters as well. They have Danny Duffy still there, Brad Keller, Mike Minor. those three guys alone are guys that can win 10 to 15 games this year if they're on and if their offense is working. I mean, this is definitely going to be a very interesting year for them. And they still have Greg Holland out there and Scott Barlow in the bullpen. Kyle Zimmer is a very good guy. He's probably going to be one of the guys that is their long reliever type deal where they have to trade him, or not trade him, but they have to use him for situations where they need to get 3 or 4 innings out of just one guy so they can use the rest of the bullpen. So I know that was a little fast and kind of haste there, a little preview of this division, but I think it's going to be a very fun division. I don't think that if you're a fan of any of these teams to count your team out. If you're the Tigers, I'm sorry, but the Tigers aren't going to be doing anything special this year. They have a decent they have a very good prospect list, and they're going to be good in a year, maybe 2, but it's not going to be them this year. Don't go anywhere. In just a second, I got the top 20 best teams of all time, in my opinion, and we'll be right back in just a moment.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
All right, and welcome back in, everybody, to the GSMC Baseball Podcast. So right here, I have my top 20 teams of all time. Now, it's going to be pretty interesting, I think, at least. I definitely know you guys probably aren't going to agree with my number one, but my number one is more sentimental to me, even though I actually wasn't alive during that year. But so let's just get into it. So at number 20, I have the 2004 Boston Red Sox. They won the World Series and ended the long drought, also called the Curse of the Bambino, when the Red Sox traded Babe Ruth. Didn't end up with anything and didn't end up with a World Series win until 2004. They had a very good ERA, team ERA at 4.18, a team batting average at 2.80, a very good, very, very good starting lineup. They had Johnny Damon, Mark Bellhorn, Manny Ramirez, David Ortiz. And right, they had Trot Nixon at first, Kevin Millar. Catching was Jason Varitek. They had Orlando Cabrera at shortstop, and then Bill Mueller at third. And then their pitching staff was also ridiculous. They had Kurt Schilling, Pedro Martinez, Tim Wakefield, Derek Lowe, and then Bronson Arroyo. It was that was a ridiculous team. And they even came back from down 3-0 to beat the Yankees in the ALCS. So they're my number 20. At number 19, I have the 95 Atlanta Braves. They won the World Series, went 90-54 and 11-3 in the postseason, won their World Series. They had a run differential of plus 105 and a team ERA of 3.44. They weren't necessarily a great hitting team, But they definitely had three great pitchers on their staff. Their first three guys are probably the best trio to stay together as long as they did, with Greg Maddux, Tom Glavine, and John Smoltz. And they also had a decent starting lineup as well. They had Marquise Grissom in center, Jeff Blazar at short, Chipper Jones at third, Fred McGriff at first, David Justice in right, Ryan Kelsko in left, Javi Lopez behind the dish, and then Mark Lemke at second. They had won 14 straight division titles from 91 until 2005, but the only time they won this World Series was during this year. And Greg Maddux went 19-2 with a 1.63 ERA. Tom Glavine went 16-7 with a 3.08 ERA, and then Smoltz closing the door with a 12-7 record and a 3.18 ERA. That was definitely the reason that they were so good. And I mean, Fred McGriff, Kelsko, and Chipper Jones and David Justice all had 20 home runs and 70 RBIs, and then Marquise Grissom led the league in 20 or was one of the league leaders in stolen bases. At number 18, I have the 1954 Cleveland Indians. So they won 111 games and lost only 43, but they got swept in the postseason and lost the World Series. They had a plus 242 run differential during the year, and then and they also had one heck of a pitching staff as well. They had Earl Wim, Bob Lemon, Art Houtman, and then Bob Feller. And then in relief, they also had Hal Newman. Their starting lineup was okay. They do have Larry Doby, who is a Hall of Famer. But other than that, their regular lineup wasn't great. They had Bobby Avila at second, and Dave Philly in right, and George Strickland at short. This is a very very good team. Unfortunately for them, they weren't able to win the World Series, but they had Earl Wim going 23-11 with a 2.73 ERA, Bob Lemon going 23-7 with a 2.72 ERA. Bob Feller toward the end of his career with a 13-3 record, a 3.09 ERA. Mike Garcia had a 19-8 record with a 2.64 ERA, and then Art Hausman had a 15-7 record with a 3.35 ERA. It was just a crazy year. And Hal Newman or Newhouser was kind of winding down in his career. It was definitely sort of a twilight, and he also pitched out of the Hal Newhouser pitched out of the bullpen with a 7-2 record, had 7 saves and a 2.51 ERA. And then Larry Doby had a great season at the plate, had 32 home runs, 126 RBIs. But they got swept in the World Series by the New York Giants and Willie Mays. At number 17, I have the 1909 Pittsburgh Pirates. They won the World Series, won 110 games, only lost 42. Had a very good lineup and some definite Hall of Famers for sure, with Honus Wagner at shortstop and Fred Clark in the outfield. Other than that, you probably won't recognize many names, just because it was a very long time ago, and the only Hall of Famers were Honus Wagner and Fred Clark. Honus Wagner that season had a 909 OPS, 100 RBIs, 35 stolen bases, and their pitching was led by Vic Willis, who had a 22-11 record with a 2.24 ERA. And then Howie Commence went 25-6 as well with a 1.62 ERA. And their team ranked second in the NL with ERA. with a team ERA of 2.07, which is incredibly impressive. At number 16, I have the 1942 St. Louis Cardinals. They had obviously Stan Musial and Ernos Slaughter. Also had Jimmy Brown, and then some decent pitchers as well with Mort Cooper and Ernie White. No Hall of Fame starting pitchers or anything like that for this team, but they did go 106-48 and then won the World Series as well. They beat out the Brooklyn Dodgers for the pennant, and then won what would be the first of their 3 World Series in 5 years when they beat the Yankees 4-1 in the World Series, which was was a great World Series. And this was also during World War II, so a lot of players weren't playing at the time. And a lot of guys were over across seas fighting in the war. At number 15, I have the 55 Brooklyn Dodgers, who went 98-55 in the regular season, and then won the World Series. They had Pee Wee Reese and Duke Snider and Rory Campanella, and then on the mound they also had Don Newcomb, and then of course you can't forget Jackie Robinson. So they lost 4 World Series over the 8 years, and then over the prior 8 years prior to 1955. And then they finally won the World Series when they beat the Yankees in 7 games. Roy Campanella had a great season that year with a 978 OPS, 32 bombs, and 107 RBIs. Duke Snider, a 1,046 OPS, 42 bombs, 136 RBIs. Carl Furillo had a OPS well over 8, 26 home runs. Gil Hodges also had a great year, 27 home runs and 102 RBIs. And then you also have Pee Wee Reese and Jackie Robinson in that amazing offense. And then their pitching staff was led by Don Newcomb, who had a 20-5 record, a 3.20 ERA. And then Clem Labine, who was a really good sort of relief pitcher, but also obviously got some starts. Had a 13-5 record, 11 saves, a 3.24 ERA, and then it also had a very young Sandy Koufax on that team as well, but he didn't get very many starts and opportunities to pitch. He only had 41 innings, or 2/3 innings pitched, but still had a 2-2 record. And then, he's arguably one of the greatest pitchers of all time, and he was barely even that big of a part on that team. So. And we're going to go now to number 14. We're going to go with the 86 Mets. The 86 Mets won 108 games, a 8-5 record in that postseason. And then this lineup was pretty stacked. You have guys like Mookie Wilson and Darryl Strawberry, and then and Gary Carter, and then you have also guys like Dwight Gooden on the pitching staff. And Darryl Strawberry and Dwight Gooden's struggles have been pretty apparent and very well documented to their struggles with drugs and alcohol and things like that. But this team still won the World Series and had a very good regular season. Obviously, they won over 100 games. Darryl Strawberry hit 27 bombs, had 93 RBIs. Gary Carter had 24 bombs, 105 RBIs. Keith Hernandez, 13 bombs and 183 RBIs. Those were their main guys offensively, and then Dwight Gooden was the ace of that staff and went 17-6, a 2.84 ERA. Also, they had a really good season from guys like Sid Fernandez, who went 16-6. Ron Darlington went 15-6, a 2.81 ERA, and then Roger McDowell and Jesse Orozco combined for 43 saves that season. So that was a very good year for them. At number 15, I have the 1905 New York Giants. This Giants team won 105 games, only lost 48. They had Joe McGinty and Christy Mathewson on the mound, and then they also had a Hall of Famer, Roger Brennahan, which was obviously very, very good. They won on the back of Christy Mathewson, who went 31-9 with a 1.28 ERA, had 338 innings pitched, and then Joe McGinty went 21-15 with a 2.87 ERA and 320 innings pitched. That is just ridiculous. You're not going to find anybody over the course of the last 100 years to even come close to a record like Christy Mathewson with 31-9, and with an ERA like that would be the greatest season of all time if somebody were able to do something like that in this era. And then now we're going to go to number 12. I have the 76 Reds. The Reds that year were obviously led by Pete Rose. They also had Ken Griffey Sr., Joe Morgan, Johnny Bench, Tony Perez, David Concepcion. On the pitching side, they had Gary Nolan, Pat Zachary, Fred Norman, Jack Billingham. This team was so good. They also had George Foster on this team. The Big Red Machines, one of the greatest teams of all time, obviously. This is one of the few years that they did win the World Series. Basically, they had a really good version of the 75 team. The 76 Reds are very good, but the 75, they basically kept everything that they had from the 75 list, or from the 75 team, and then built on top of that. The Reds ERA went from the Reds ERA from 75 to 76 went up, but they were still very good offensively with Joe Morgan and Pete Rose, obviously the hit king, Johnny Bench leading the way behind the plate, and Tony Perez. Oh my gosh, this team is just really, really good. So now we're going to go to number 11, the 32 Yankees. They had a 107 record, 47 losses. They had a ridiculous amount of talent on this team as well. They had Earl Combs at center, Babe Ruth and right, Lou Gehrig at first, Bill Dickey at behind the plate, Tony Lazzari at second, Lefty Gomez and Red Ruffington on the mound, and they also had Herb Pennock on the mound as well. They weren't as dominant as the 27 Yankees, but they still got it there. They still got a title. Babe Ruth had an OPS of 1.150, a 42 bombs, 137 RBIs. Lou Gehrig had an OPS of 1.072, 34 bombs and 154 RBIs. And Ben Chapman had 107 RBIs and 38 stolen bases. Lefty Gomez went 24-7 in that season. Red Ruffing had an 18-7 record, and this team was basically a lesser version of that 1927 New York Yankees. At number 10, I have the Chicago Cubs from 1907. This team was really, really good. They went 107-45, won the World Series, obviously. I think every team on this list except for I can't remember off the top of my head. Give me just 1 second. So every team except for the 54 Cleveland Indians on this list, I think, won the World Series. So back to where we were with the 1907 Cubs. They had Frank Chance at first, Johnny Evers at second, Joe Tinker at short. They had Orville Overall as one of their starters. Mordecai Brown also. They had a phenomenal pitching staff. Orville Overall went 23-7, a 1.68 ERA. Mordecai Brown 20-6, 1.39 ERA. Jack Feister went 14-9 with a 1.15 ERA. Their team ERA was 1.73. That is a ridiculous ERA. Like it's just kind of crazy to me how ridiculously low that ERA is. So at number 9 we have the 84 Tigers. These 84 Tigers had a really good offense. They had Kurt Gibson, who had 27 bombs, 29 stolen bases. They also had Lou Whittaker and Alan Trammell. They led the league in scoring. And they also had Lance Parrish, who had 33 bombs and 98 RBIs that year. Jack Morris was their ace. He went 19-11, a 3.60 ERA. Dan Petrie went 18-8, a 3.24 ERA, and then they also had Willie Hernandez closing the door with a 9-3 ERA, a 1.92, 9-3 record, a 1.82 ERA, 32 saves, and he actually took home that year the AL Cy Young Award and the MVP honor because he appeared in 80 games. At number 8, I have the Baltimore Orioles, the Orioles team from 1970. They went 108-54, won the World Series, obviously. They had Jim Palmer as their ace, Frank Robinson and right, and Brooks Robinson at third. Those are the only Hall of Famers on that team. Jim Palmer went 20-10. Mike Seller went 24-8. Dave McNally 24-9. They had 119 combined starts carrying the hill. They also had Frank the Tank Robinson, who had a 918 OPS that year, 25 home runs, 78 RBIs, and Bugs Powell, who had 35 home runs, 114 RBIs. And then we have the 1902 Pirates. There wasn't a World Series back then, but they won 103 games, 36 losses, had a team ERA of 2.30 and a run differential of 3.35. That is crazy. They had Jack O'Connor behind the plate, Fred Clark and left. Hannes Wagner wasn't playing shortstop then. He was actually in center. And then at starting pitching, they had Jack Sespro, Deacon Philippi, and then Sam Lieber, Ed Donahue, and Jesse Tannehill. Wagner that year hit 330, had an OPS of 857, 91 RBIs. Fred Clark, 316 batting average, 53 RBIs. They didn't hit a lot of home runs, but nobody really hit any home runs back then. They did lead the league in doubles that year with 189 and triples with 95, and then runs scored with 774. And their pitching was just as dominant. Jack Sespro, 28-6, 2.17 ERA. Deacon Philippi, 20-9 with a 2.05 ERA. Jesse Tannehill, 20-6, a 1.95 ERA. That's a crazy amount. So at number 5, I have the 29 Philadelphia Athletics. They went 104-46. They had Al Simmons, Jimmy Fox, Lefty Grove, Mickey Cochran. This team was crazy good. Babe Ruth and the Yankees dominated a lot of the 20s, but and the 30s. But in 2029, the Philadelphia Athletics won the pennant, 18 games over the Yankees. Led by the best probably 3, 4, or 5 hitters in history. Mickey Cochran, 331 batting average, 7 home runs, 95 RBIs. Al Simmons, 365 average, 34 home runs, 157 RBIs. Jimmy Fox, 354 average, 33 home runs, 118 RBIs. Crazy dangerous offense. And then their pitching staff was really good as well, with Lefty Grove, 20-6, 2.81 ERA. Rube Wahlberg with an 18-11 record, 3.60 ERA, and then George Earnshaw with a 24-8 record, a 3.29 ERA. At number 5, at number 5, I have the 98 Yankees. These Yankees had Jeter, Paul O'Neill, Bernie Williams, Tino Martinez, Darryl Strawberry, Jorge Posada, Scott Boras. And then on the pitching side, they had David Wells, Andy Pettit, David Cone, Orlando Hernandez. This team was crazy, crazy good. Bernie Williams that year 997 OPS, a 26 home runs, and 97 RBIs. Tino Martinez had an 860 OPS, 28 home runs, 123 RBIs. Derek Jeter, 19 home runs, 84 RBIs. Paul O'Neill, 24 home runs, 116 RBIs. That team scored 964 runs. David Cone with a 20-7 record, a 3.55 ERA. David Wells went 18-4, 3.49 ERA, and Mariano Rivera also in that back half of the bullpen at 36 saves and 1.91 ERA. At number 4, I have the 75 Reds. This team also won the World Series. I know we had the 76 Reds earlier. They had the exact same team as they did in 95 or 96, but just a little bit early, just the year prior, actually. I mean, the Big Red Machine being on here twice is no mistake at all. I mean, this team was just crazy. So they had, in 1939, there was the New York Yankees at number 2. At number 3, I have the 39 Yankees. This team was crazy good as well. They had Lefty Gomez, Red Ruffing, Joe DiMaggio, Bill Dickley, Joe Gordon. I mean, it's just kind of crazy how many teams or how many Hall of Famers were on this team. They had the largest run differential in history. They had a plus 411 run differential. This team was crazy. Joe DiMaggio hit 381 that year, had 30 home runs, 126 RBIs. Bill Dickley, 24 home runs, 105 RBIs. Joe Gordon, 28 home runs and 111 RBIs. And then George Selkirk had 21 home runs and 101 RBIs as well. Even though he's not a Hall of Famer, he still had one heck of a season that year. And then at number 2, and this is going to be surprising to some people, is the 1927 Yankees. This team went 110-44, 4-0 in the World Series. Run differential for the year 376 plus. They had Earl Campbell, Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Tony Lazzari, Pat Collins behind the dish, Joe Dungan at third, and Bob Musil at left. They had Waite Hoyt at starting pitching, Herb Pennock at as well. Those are both Hall of Famers. Their lineup was called Murderers Row with Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. Ruth hit that year 60 home runs. Gehrig hit 47 that year. Gehrig had 175 RBIs to Ruth's 164. It was one of the most feared lineups in baseball history. Their rotation also had Waite Hoyt, who went 22-7 that year, and Herb Pennock at 19-8. They had a fantastic season. All right, and finally, I'm going to try and wrap this one up as fast as I can. My number 1 team of all time is definitely the 1961 Yankees. I fell in love growing up watching. I watched the movie 61 by Billy Crystal. And it just made me fall in love with this whole lineup, or this whole team. The year before, Roger Maris won the MVP. Maris was hated in New York, and this season, him and Mickey Mantle had the home run chase to see who could beat Ruth. Maris ended up doing it in game 161, and it had an asterisk by it, and I don't think it should have had an asterisk, but it still did. It had Yogi Berra and Mickey Mantle and Whitey Ford on that team. Roger Maris, like I said, won the MVP the year prior. Maris broke the home run record that year, had 141 RBIs. Mickey Mantle had 54 home runs, 128 RBIs. And they both probably would have broken it had Mickey Mantle not gotten hurt toward the end of that season. On the bump, Whitey Ford had a 25-4 record with a 3.21 ERA and won the only Cy Young of his career. So that I have personal reasons just because I love that movie so much and it really touched me and helped me fall in love with baseball. But that's my list, guys. Let me know what y'all think. Follow us on Twitter at GSMC_baseball. Follow me on Twitter at Patrick Kenney, KENNEY _. Leave us a review, give us a comment on YouTube, let us know how we're doing, let us know what I can give you guys to help you guys enjoy this as much as I do. So thank you guys for listening.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.